start letting some people in here. We'll get started in another minute or so, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Great. How are you doing today?
Oh, it's been a crazy week. Any one of these dockets takes 4 times the amount of work now with COVID.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah, it's just a lot more paperwork.
Yeah.
And a lot more e-filing things, and getting signatures and whatnot involves, something that would take us 5 minutes to do at court takes us, 25 minutes over the computer.
Well, how's the paperwork? Are you doing a lot of things that you're saving electronically now, or are you still saving paper?
I mean, maybe physical paper is a little bit less, but I mean, it's a lot more. We're doing a lot of the clerk's work. Every time there's a continuance, we're drafting 6 different things and e-filing them and whatnot. And there's a lot more continuances sent as we typically would. Or at least it's not right away. So everything's required, more phone calls, and a docket that took me, the morning is now taking an entire day to get done, and into the, even longer.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's, and all 3 of us are having to jump on every but all docket, or the 2 big dockets anyway, to help out to get through it all.
Well, we certainly appreciate you taking your time.
Unless we had a huge docket.
Yeah. We certainly
Fridays aren't as bad.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, it's about 11. I guess we can get started if that's okay. Welcome, everyone. This is John Lee with St. Louis Real Estate Investors Association. We're very privileged to have Davis, Travaglini and LLC with us today. And it looks like we have Christopher Bosler and Christina Travaglini. I think I see her up there too.
Yeah, you do. I'm under Kathy's login because I used her link to sign in, and I guess it came up with her names. She's attached to it, but
excellent.
I'm here.
Thank you so much. We do appreciate you guys being here today. So, it's fill us in. What's going on today?
I feel like we, as I say every week that I'm on, I wish I had more news than we do. St. Louis County, which is where I do my landlord-tenant work, is currently in phase 0. They moved from phase 1 back to phase 0. The presiding judge puts an order out usually every week. Sometimes it's every 2 weeks. The recent order came out yesterday that we will remain in phase 0. Phase 0 essentially means that no one is allowed in the court at all, at least the public. They were having in phase 1 some certain types of cases where they were allowing people inside the courtroom, very limited, but there is no one allowed. We're still in phase 0. They're getting more positive cases of employees within St. Louis County of positive COVID tests. And so there is also been, I don't know what department they worked in, but we got notice that one of the court employees was tested positive and then apparently had died shortly thereafter. So that's not good. But we're still continuing along the same procedurally what we've been doing with having the hearings by Zoom video. That will still continue for now. I think that's going to be the case, honestly, for the rest of the year. The frustrations and the difficulties are just because the courts are so far behind in getting caught up with getting the cases that we are filing on a court date. It's taken a little longer than normal. And so there's cases that I'll file that I'm not getting a court date until 5 or 6 weeks later, which is very frustrating. But they're still not doing the sheriff executions at this point in St. Louis County. So I'm not sure how much difference it makes with getting a quick court date when I can't send the sheriff out to get him out anyway. Let me think. The other, there is, so the presiding judge in St. Louis County had contacted Kathy Davis about forming this committee with landlord attorneys and some tenant attorneys. And so they had a meeting a Zoom meeting on Tuesday. The presiding judge was in on that meeting, as well as one of the associate civil judges in St. Louis County, Judge Heggie. And then there was maybe 3 landlord attorneys, and then maybe 4, 5, or 6 tenant attorneys, mostly from legal services or Arch City, those type of tenant attorneys. So I'm not sure what's going to come of it. I feel like there was just a lot of each side kind of relaying their concerns, their frustrations. So they have another meeting scheduled in August. And again, I don't know what's going to come of this. I think Kathy might be a little more optimistic than I am, just because I continue to be frustrated with how things are going in the county. And so like I said, she's more optimistic. We're keeping our fingers crossed. They know a lot of the concerns now. So now we're just going to wait and see within these next few weeks if there's anything to implement any change with regard to those concerns. Or if we just stay how we're going. But that's unfortunately the only update I've got for you right now.
Okay.
All right, I guess I'll cover the rest. I guess probably more of you care more about the city, so we'll start there. That one is the city. We are still going kind of, I guess, as smoothly as one could expect. Courts no one's allowed in the courthouse. Everything's being done virtually with the exception of some restraining order stuff or some domestic criminal stuff that needs in person, but pretty much everything is going through WebEx. It's, slower. I had a client call me yesterday who had tried to file last week or so their own pro se case, and she got a court date in October. We thankfully, and the other attorneys who are the bulk filing attorneys, most likely I'm able to get dates here in August still, and we got special court dates for us. But if you're thinking about filing on your own, that's not to say you have to use an attorney, but that's the timeline you can expect. Is if you don't have a special, if you don't have an in with a judge, let's put it that way, you're probably getting, sometime in October. So this, if you typically file on your own, this may be the time to hire an attorney just to get things moving quicker, but make sure you hire one that knows how to get a quicker date. Otherwise, if they just file without asking for a date and don't know which date to ask for, it's going to be October. I mean, that's just the way it's going to be for the time being. Sheriff's still putting people out, so that's at least good. For those of you who might have properties that are at all affected by the CARES Act, that did expire at the end of last week, but we anticipate that something will be, if Congress ever, they can bridge some of their differences in the next week or so. We anticipate a new bill being entered that will probably extend that. Again, that's for anybody who's got Section 8 or if your property is a federally backed mortgage, which will be your most common ones for your smaller landlords. At the same time, right now, you can send, if you have any of these tenants, go ahead and send out a 30-day pay or quit notice, because in the event, you'll need it in the event that Congress does not do anything, you will need that in order to evict them in September. Otherwise, you'll be blocked until you do that. It may be the last time you ever get to threaten the tenants with eviction, or at least remind them that they owe you rent for a few months if they do extend it. So go ahead. If you have a property that's been hung up with that, go ahead and send that notice out just to be on the safe side. Now, if your property isn't that, it doesn't apply to you, but just something to keep an eye on. Jefferson County, if you have Jefferson County, I know I see Jennifer, they are closed still this week. I have not heard any word about what's happening next week. I've been reaching out. Jefferson County is weird enough. My only source tends to be some attorneys I know who practice solely out there and are the bar association, and their Facebook page has been there. That's how Jefferson County issues these orders, is over Facebook apparently, which I'm having to get up to date on that one. So I currently have 2 cases set on next week in Jefferson County, but I have no idea if they're going. I see a question about how to find out if you have a government-backed loan on your rentals. You're going to want to call your lender to see, but it's the big ones are Freddie, Fannie, FHA, or VA loans. So if you have something like that, that's that you got a lower interest rate, most likely because you got that, that's something to look into. But if you want to be really sure, call your lender. That's the only way I know to do it. I understand there might actually, I think there's actually a, I looked this up the other day. There is, if you type in CARES Act loan database, I think someone created a database so that tenants and defense attorneys could look up that stuff. So you might be able to Google that, and I can't give you the exact address, but Google that and you should be able to find out if, that might be helpful to find out if your properties in that database is one that's owned. But to be extra sure, I'd call your lender. That's going to be your number one way of protecting yourself. Because worst case scenario, you file it and they get your case dismissed, but you don't want to spend the time and money doing it if you're going to get your case kicked.
But right now, Chris, just to clarify with them, that's only going to apply to a tenant that owes rent through July. If you have a tenant that has paid current and then starting in August stops paying, then you don't fall under that.
Right. And
unless of course the CARES Act gets amended. But
so if you have somebody who
Are we still on?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna get on.
Kathy's about to join too. So if you have somebody, it's just August rent and your property does count that, you may want to file as soon as they owe August rent if you think they're not going to pay it. And in the rare occasion someone doesn't owe you July, but they're not going to pay August, maybe. But my guess is anything that Congress is going to do is going to happen next week. So it's probably you're not going to really be able to thread that needle to the point that on the rare case somebody. St. Charles, they shut down back to zero. They are now starting next week moving back to phase 1, which is where they let emergency cases, which they count landlord-tenant cases as emergency cases. So I'm going to be back in court in person in St. Charles next Friday, assuming we don't have another case. They had a shutdown there because an attorney as I understand it, an attorney whose daughter lives with her, who is a nurse, her daughter came down with COVID. She got symptoms. She was in court for 4 hours on a domestic in-person hearing, and they had to quarantine everybody to make sure. But I haven't heard of anybody who caught it there, and they seem to be ramping back up. So St. Charles is, still doing in person, and just, so for your landlord tenant cases, you can file in St. Charles now, and, and you should be fine for the time being. But I think this is something you can expect, particularly for the jurisdictions that are letting people inside the courthouses. You're going to have a month where it's open, and then you're going to have 2 weeks where it shuts back down. And that's just the way the things are going to be for the next while. So as I tell my clients are having me file cases now, I can file them, and I'm praying it's still going to move forward, but you never know when things are going to shut back down. At least the city not letting people in the courthouse, should keep that to at least as a minimum can be, where they don't feel like they have to shut things down completely. My concern is that we get it in the clerk's little, their office, and all of a sudden the clerks all go home for a month and nothing gets issued. So that's really the concern. So we're all just kind of, rolling with it, playing it by ear. So keep an eye on, whatever your preferred news source is, and watching the CARES Act, because I'm pretty sure, I know they're trying to expand that moratorium, I heard, to the Democrats, to non-federal landlords, but I don't know how they do it legally. So I anticipate if they do it, it'll just be an extension of the same language they had in the last one. So if your properties weren't covered, it probably won't be covered it won't be a problem this time. But just keep an eye on it. That's the big thing. And oh, there's Kathy. So maybe she can take over once she mutes herself.
Hi, what have we been doing so far?
Welcome.
Hi, John.
How are you?
Good. I just came back from the courthouse doing foreclosures. You know, we're doing them out in front now, so I'm a little wet, and it's very easy to find a parking space.
The good news.
Right.
Wow. How are the foreclosures going? I haven't even thought about that.
Well, I would say we have more people than, you know, we mostly represent the smaller investor with respect to that kind of thing. The large banks, I think, you know, all the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac foreclosures were stopped in the CARES Act. And so they might just be starting up again. And they go through a much more complicated process than we do to foreclose. It's kind of unfortunate because Missouri has a really simple process and those guys drag it out and charge more. But yeah, I think it's interesting. The foreclosures I was doing today were all on empty buildings. So, you know, there's a reason to want to get those buildings back into the hands of the investor and, you know, being taken care of and fixed up and, you know, put on the market or otherwise occupied. So I think a lot of you probably know about neighborhoods, a lot in North County, that really suffered after 2008 because there were foreclosure properties where the banks weren't taking care of them, or there were empty properties where the banks weren't even wanting to foreclose because they already had too much inventory and the market was bad. And that really caused problems for a lot of our neighborhoods, I think. Hey, Christine. Oh, Christine, you have my name too. Hi.
Yeah, I must have just, because I used your link, got your name on there.
Oh, okay.
I didn't give a lot of information about your committee meeting. I did discuss it a little bit, but maybe now that you're here, you could give them a little more input about, because I wasn't in hearing everyone on that, but maybe you could give a little, and I did say you were a little more optimistic than I was, that something would actually come of this committee, but
yeah, well, Christine actually told me I did a good job afterwards. I was very impressed. She rarely says that to me. So, Christine has very high standards. So, and the courts are not meeting them right now. So, I will say she holds our clients to the same high standards. So you'll know it if you haven't done something Christine wants, because she will be on you. But she will be taking care of you too. It was a very interesting meeting. You know, they kind of, originally it was going to be an even number of landlord attorneys and tenant attorneys, and it ended up being way more tenant attorneys. But the presiding judge, Judge Burton, called on us to go first, and Christine had pulled statutes for me, and we were prepared on the law. I mean, we're talking about a meeting with judges and lawyers about things that are happening in court. This is, to me, was not the time for sob stories or whining or anything like that. This is, let's see what the law is, and can we get that law enforced? And, you know, if there's some other law that we've overlooked or a case interpreting a statute that says we can't do evictions right now, then bring it forward. But we went through the statutes. Christine was told recently in the county that there was no docket preference for landlord cases, and there is, and there's two different statutes that talk about it. And so we read those to the group, and then we moved on because there's limited court slots right now. We're not getting court dates as quickly as we would like. I will say that our judge in the county is really bending over backwards and putting in extra time and trying really hard to accommodate us. But there's a lot of cases, you know, straight collection cases like MSD, where they just continue them and continue them and continue them. And they use up all the docket slots that are available before our case even gets assigned to a court date. And landlord cases also generally get resolved on the first court date, probably 90% of them or more. And so we're not using the docket slots repeatedly for the same case. You know, we're pretty much one and done, and then let us have our next group. And so that's one big issue for us, is getting our cases assign court dates and summonses issued, you know, as quickly as possible. And the second big issue for us, and I think this is the big issue overall out of all the things that we're dealing with the courts, I think the number one problem is St. Louis County refusing to do landlord executions. I think that's, I'm almost at the point where we're thinking about taking a writ to the Court of Appeals. I don't want to burn myself with every judge in St. Louis County, but this is getting out of control. There's another landlord attorney who is interested possibly in doing that with me. So we're thinking about that. Apparently, a deputy in St. Louis County, a sheriff's deputy, died recently of COVID. Were you able to find out any more about that, Christine?
You know, all I found out there, I was telling everyone here that Burton put out an administrative order dated yesterday that I had printed off in red. And
okay.
it doesn't say a sheriff's deputy. It classifies it as a court employee. So I don't know for sure, unless you have other information that is more accurate, that it's definitely from the sheriff's department. It just states that a court employee who had been tested positive for COVID and then a couple days later had died.
Yeah. Well,
And so I don't know who it is or where they were in the court. All it said further was that any staff that worked closely with them were being quarantined and the areas disinfected, et cetera, but that's all it said.
Well, we're going to look into that some more and call some of our friends at the courthouse and see if we can figure that out.
I couldn't get anyone to answer either. I tried to make a call to my contact in the sheriff's department and nobody answered. And then I tried to also make contact with a person in the executions department, the clerk that I talked to, and she's not there today.
Okay.
So.
And it might be a bad idea to do the writ right if somebody just died, particularly a sheriff's deputy, but we're going to find out more information on that. But in any event, those were the two main points that we made during this Zoom conference with the judges and the other lawyers. And a couple of the other landlord lawyers had a chance to talk, and they pretty much said they agreed with us, you know, with the points that we were making. And then the landlord lawyers just one after another ranted and raved. I mean, the tenant lawyers ranted and raved about, you know, horrible landlords and, you know, told anecdotes. One anecdote from a tenant lawyer who I personally consider completely useless was about someone who supposedly was disabled, and a judgment was taken against this tenant in the city in January. And according to this tenant lawyer, she said, and so then the landlord sat on it until now. Well, first of all, they want us to not execute. And secondly, what do you mean sat on it? They probably couldn't get it processed until now. So there I was on Sunday night trying to figure out how to do an emergency order to quash an execution. Well, you know what, lawyer, I'm trying not to say anything bad. She's been practicing long enough to know how to do a TRO, and you can get online and file those and schedule them and everything. I mean, that's not really a problem. And they're heard in the city by WebEx with judges. But, you know, what did you do? Wait until the last minute to decide you needed to do something about this? Or did the tenant wait until the last minute to come in? And have they not contacted the landlord at all or made any payment arrangements or anything since January? I mean, we have clients that are owed thousands and thousands of dollars, and it just keeps mounting up. So I didn't think her story was particularly credible or compelling. And then another tenant lawyer who I like slightly better, but he's still a whiner, talked about someone who had gotten illegally locked out in the city. Well, we don't advocate for any of our clients or any landlords to illegally lock people out. If you call us and ask us if you should do that, we'll say no. We'll talk to you about the options. But I think the problem is that people are getting desperate enough that the law won't happen for them as it should, that they're getting ready to act outside the law. Don't recommend it, but I understand the frustration. And then the Professor Tokars, Karen Tokars from Washington University, who was a professor when I was there many, many years ago, and she's a practical person. She runs the mediation program in St. Louis County for the pro se landlord docket. And she said, there's this money coming from the federal government to stop evictions, millions of dollars. The city's getting some, the county's getting some. She sent over to me this list of resources, and I'm going to send it to John so that he can put it up on you guys' website. Or you might just want to put up the initial one for the county COVID hotline and that kind of thing. But there's a lot of agencies and places like that. I'm sure you might have some tenants who are not paying just because of the COVID disaster and, might be able to have this help. And if you can get their rent paid for them, then that's income to you. So we would, recommend that you look into that. We're still hoping to, get the execution started again, but I'm not sure what has to happen to do that. But in any event, as this meeting wound up, it was just like, oh, we're going to schedule another meeting on August 18th. The judges kind of said, we think there's some things that are going to be happy and that you're going to be very happy with. We didn't know if they were addressing us or the tenant lawyers, and none of those things were specifically said to us. So we don't really know, what's going to happen, except we're going to talk to everybody again in a month. We certainly want to keep the dialogue open. We are pleased that we were among the people invited to participate in this, but we're not sure that we made any immediate changes. But we're going to be following up on that. Everything else, I think Chris and Christina probably talked to you, probably more Chris, about the other courts. They are having their ups and downs, but things seem to be still happening. Is that right, Chris?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm back in person in St. Charles next Friday. I have hearings in Jefferson on Tuesday, but their Facebook page has not been updated yet to tell me if it's happening. That's how I find out about these things. So the tenants know before I do.
Chris actually went to the city to a storage locker facility or a warehouse?
Oh, warehouse yesterday to try
to get a consent judgment signed with the tenant. So
I tried to do it. I did a trailer park in Jefferson.
Yeah, he went to a trailer
park. I was unsuccessful in getting the guy in the trailer park to sign. He was wise enough to know that the court had bought him more time. So,
well, we're doing everything we can. How are you guys doing? Does anybody have any questions or things they need to talk about?
Looks like Jennifer had a question, and you might have addressed this a little bit here, Chris, but she wanted to know if she needs to send another termination notice because she sent one March 31st and then again on June 30th.
Well, if you sent one on June 30th and assuming you gave them until July 31st, then no. As long as you don't accept any rent for August, if they try to pay. So anything, when it comes to a termination notice about resending it, it always depends on whether or not, or not always, but most of the time it depends on whether or not you've accepted any rent after the point that the termination was ended. So the lease ended. So, because once you do that, you're back to square one. So as long as no rent's been accepted, then, come the end of the termination period, you can go ahead and file your unlawful detainer. And there should be anything that the CARES Act stops you if you happen to be one of those properties that for an unlawful detainer, unless of course you just terminate it for not paying rent.
So the writ thing, we'll get back to this with you guys again next week, but we're seriously considering doing it. We might want some sample clients. I think we actually have one now. Christine has someone who the county won't act on a judgment that was from January, and it's the person's just so far behind. And there's another landlord lawyer who is interested in doing this with me. So if you have something in the county that is an old judgment and you can't get it executed on, let us know. And we also might put our hand out for some help with some fees on this. We'll let you know about that. I think Jerry Hopping has some money left over from some fights with the county and municipalities about nuisance ordinances. I'm gonna reach out to him. Anybody else?
Anybody else have any other questions? That's good updates. And would you say still, if somebody's just barely behind, we should still probably try to work with them
Yes.
with all this going on?
Yeah. And I think I'm going to get you over this, this information about, in fact, it might be under my computer. Let me see if I can grab it out here. Is this it? Yeah. Okay. I'll read this out to you right now because you can all take this down. There's a whole list of things on the St. Louis County website, organizations that have money or are willing to help people work out the rent or, you know, that kind of thing. But the one thing that you might want to take down right now is the COVID hotline. It operates 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. during the week and 8 a.m. to noon on Saturday. And the telephone number for that is 314-615-2660. And Professor Tokar sent me this list that's available on the county website too, that is 9 pages long of agencies and resources that tenants can reach out to try to get help with their rent. And I think a lot of these places probably, you know, screen them and make sure they're really, really needy. But, you know, yeah, if they need help like this, they should get the help. There's charities and governments waiting to help them. Now, the people who have been squandering their extra $600 a week and, you know, that kind of thing, and failed to make any effort, not as sympathetic. You know, that $600 a week, that works out to like 30 grand a year. Over and above the regular unemployment and any other income that the household might have. They should be able to pay their rent on that. So if anybody has a case that they know the person was getting the unemployment and the enhanced unemployment and they're still not paying, and you have a judgment, you can't execute on it, that might be a good one to add to our writ application if we need to do that.
Yeah. One thing that's come up in the city this week is it's in line with the resources that are becoming available. I assume the county will eventually go along those lines. The city has been given a grant, or I think it was the state, to this mediation company that is now stepping in on landlord-tenant dockets to offer their services to mediate cases between landlords and tenants. Previously, it had been limited to just the pro se dockets. They are now expanding to the represented party dockets. So the courts, my judge is not saying she's ordering everybody to go to mediation just yet, but she says if enough people refuse it, she may go that route. So as it stands right now, what happened in my docket this week was anything that we could not, you know, anyone who showed up, it was continued. The judge gave the number to this mediation service. They told them to call us first, but anybody who we couldn't resolve things is supposed to call this mediation company, who's then supposed to call us and try to work it out. So it may be something that if you're doing your own cases, you may run into, you're probably used to that more so than we are, but it's just something that's coming up so that they're going to be having more mediation options. And I saw those. Something more, Congress was also doing a separate bill about that, about trying to provide more money to tenants to hire their own attorneys for these kind of, to defend rent and possession cases. So you may start seeing more defense attorneys jumping on, taking advantage of some of this money from the government if it ever passes. So something to look out for. I'm not seeing any new chats.
Any other questions for anybody? You did a great job with the weekly updates, and we really appreciate this too, because it's just, I mean, you're our front line for all this. We really do appreciate your time in this very much.
Well, it's nice to take a break and chat with you guys.
Okay. Well, thank you. Anybody else have any other questions? Doesn't look like it, so. Okay, well, we don't want to take up too much of your time, but we do very much appreciate it. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Christopher. It's just, we look forward to this every week. I know I do. I want to make sure I at least get out of the shower and have a clean shirt on. So it gives me something to do, you know, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're all being kind of discreet about what we're wearing on our bottom halves.
Yeah, that's what I heard. You just don't look down, you know. Yeah. So, but
okay, thanks guys.
Thank you so much. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.
See you then.
All right.
Bye,
Thank you,
thanks.
everybody. All righty.